All right, let me turn it over to you. And once again, Alan, you have continued the tradition. First question. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. I'd like to make two general comments about the papers, then two specific suggestions for two of the papers. One is really good papers. I really like the way you did this. And my other general comment is I want you to consider putting this in that general context I talked about earlier about bank competition performance. Regulations affect different banks differently and affects their competition. And so just think about if you could do that. Specific comments, one for John, one for Yue. They both have to do with what you're controlling for. So, John, I mentioned in my earlier presentation, we found that in an earlier paper that if there are more community banks in the area, there will be less financial constraints for small businesses. And you found that if there are more banks using the SBA program, the outcomes are better also. But did you control for? I think you should control for percentage of community banks in the area to see if that's what's really driving your result, and just make sure you can rule that out. And for you, also, your control group is a little suspicious to me. So why are these banks that are exempt from the rules continuing to report? It could be something about you're looking at the difference between those banks and the banks that I would say more rationally decide not to report, not to get complaints. Maybe it's something about that group that's explaining your results. So I would just caution you, try other control groups as well, because this may not be a perfect control group.
Good point.
Yes.
Kurt Knudsen from Freedom Bank in Overland Park. We've got 3 comments and a question, and I'll try to keep it brief. Peter, I agree with the comments that you made relative to the CRA maximum size.
I figured you would. I figured you would. I looked right at you.
But I agree with much of what you said, so I appreciate your comments. Second thing I want to mention was another advantage to the SBA lending is it gets subtracted from your legal lending exposure, so you can grow further with a customer or perhaps take on bigger credit right out of the gate.
That's a great point.
Third comment is, Tim, your presentation from a couple of years ago on stress test is incorporated into our capital plan, so I just want to...
Fantastic.
The question that I have for Taylor is, really appreciated the presentation. You were able to keep it really organized in my mind. And the only thing that I would like to see added to it is, can you tell us in those markets where you found those trades, were they served by community banks or were they served by national banks or both?
So the answer to that is yes, we can tell you that, but no, I can't tell you that today. So one of the nice things is we can study the areas and we can look at it in particular who the complaints are against. So that's certainly something that's really on the top of our queue to figure out.
More questions? Comments? Go ahead.
So my question was half just stolen, as far as the differentiation between the nature of the complaint. No, by the way, I'm Cindy Force from the San Francisco Fed. But to build on that, some of the complaints could be against non-banks versus banks, so to actually stratify not just the community and the larger, but then also that could help drive the answer to Tim's question about the potential policy implications that the people higher up than you are going to respond to. Because if you see that there is a real stratification between the quality of lending by different types of lenders, that could lead to a suggestion that the policy needs to be stratified based upon the type of lender, which would be consistent with a lot of the discussions throughout this whole conference about regulatory burden being relative to risk.
Right, that's certainly true, and especially in relationship to banks and non-banks, and something that we were concerned about early was the role of servicers, because a lot of the complaints are about servicers, which it's kind of a mixed bag. It could have been because you were missold to start with, or it could be because you have an abusive servicer. And so we, in some of the robustness tests I didn't get a chance to talk about, we sort of scrubbed the data of some of those large names of servicers and tried to make sure this was a bank-only issue. But sort of, building on this other point, the more that we can dig in and see where this is actually happening would be helpful for what's actionable.
I'm Jana, one from California. I'm going to build somewhat on Cynthia and also ask about a 60,000 foot level question. We've been working with CRA since 1977. I don't think the law is static. Maybe others do. What do you think, after the research that you've all done, do you think needs to be changed? Or has it outweighed its usefulness? Is it done? Do we have what we need? And yes, it's a political question.
Well, I think that that's certainly in the eye of the beholder. I think we're all maximizing over different objective functions. As far as, are we thinking about maximizing profits or maximizing a much more complicated social welfare equation? And so I guess the answer to that question will depend on maybe where you sit along those lines. I don't have a satisfying answer for you, but this is an area where academic research is alive and well and trying to study what are the implications and very more precisely articulate what are the costs and the benefits so that can get tossed back to the folks that can make those decisions and figure out what is the objective function that we should be maximizing.
Yeah, I guess to the extent that there are some reforms that will help us to identify some of the changes to the law, how would that affect the banks and the local communities. So we would actually expect more reform experiments, so-called experiments, to help us to give more informed suggestion regarding the laws, whether it's good or bad. So actually, we're looking forward for more reforms and debates.
Yeah, and I'll say, as everybody's been talking, I'm learning more about CRA as I go too. And I remember I once tried to contact somebody to learn about the CRA data, and I became convinced that there was just a phone sitting in a warehouse somewhere that nobody ever answered. And so it's, you're continually learning about how these things work and, developing hypotheses. So as everybody was talking, I was thinking about more research that can be done, but you'll notice we're all very careful to not give policy prescriptions per se at the end. It's like, this should just add to the debate. Here's one benefit. There could be costs. And looking at a whole social welfare thing, I think everybody's pretty wary of.
I think Peter made an excellent point too in his comments that why just banks, right? So why are they singled out? Shouldn't it be all or none? And so there is an additional burden on banks. Other creditors in the area should also be held to the same standard.
Well, and the whole $1 million threshold makes no sense at all in modern business, does it? No. So get rid of it.
Go ahead.
Hello, I'm Cynthia Blankenship from Bank of the West in Grapevine, Texas, and we are SBA preferred lender and have been since we opened our doors in the mid-'80s. But we've seen a lot of players coming in and out of the market, and I was wondering, in your research, did you look at, when you were looking at the performance trends of those loans during the crisis, did you look at the experience of those SBA lenders? For example, how long had they been an active player in that market? And number two, did you look at the duration of the loans? Was it a new loan versus a seasoned credit? And did that have any impact at all?
Yeah, this is a great point. So it was a pretty just a simple analysis. I just looked at 3-year default rates and charge-off rates. So of all the SBA loans that were granted during the crisis, did they default within 3 years, and how did that rate change? I think it would be really interesting to look at the preferred lenders, also the express lenders. I could break that down a little bit further. That's not something that I could do now. Or that's not something that I know the answer to now. That's something that I could do and I think would be interesting. And as well, how long they've been an SBA lender, I think would definitely come into play. I'll note that with Alan's comment earlier, I deleted all of the controls, but in there are controls for local capital percent of large bank branches, which is kind of the inverse of community banks. And but I could dive deeper into that analysis because I think that really kind of nails down, are these loans good or not? What happened to them?
Okay, I believe we are out of time, and thank you, all the presenters.